Continuing our year-end conversations with the people who are tracking the stories both locally, nationally, even internationally. A pleasure to welcome to the conversation Dave Korzinski. He is a research assistant. Dave Korzinski, who is a research associate at Angus Reid Institute. Of course, we drop in frequently with Shachik Hurl, who's the executive director of ARI, but lots of times also find ourselves in conversation with Dave. David, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you being here to talk about some of those bigger issue stories shaping the conversation in the nation.
Yeah, it's been a very active year in polling. I know all years kind of have that, but it feels like this one, just with the way that the country is operating right now and the political dynamics, has been a busy one. And a shout out to Shachi. We miss her, and I'm sure she'll be back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if we start with an election or we end with an election, but I think I do want to talk about something that we're dealing with right now here in BC, which, of course, is the decision on whether or not we're going to go to rep by pop or whether we're going to stay with first past the post. But long before the anger was being directed at the Horgan government, incredible amounts of anger directed at the Trudeau government, as he had promised during the election, and I'm sure you remember it as well. He stood there and said, this election federally will be the last one conducted by first past the post. We are going to switch to electoral reform. We're going to go to representative by population. Wasn't that a campaign dream that disappeared?
Yeah, that's one of the big disappointments when we look back at, it's been 3 years of Trudeau and the Liberal government at this point. And there have been campaign promises that were delivered, and they'll be very quick to bring those up. And, they got marijuana through, and we got NAFTA signed, which was one of the big issues pressing. But the electoral reform one is one that, and I think you're going to see this in the campaign over the next year, is that particularly Jagmeet Singh, I think, is going to bring it up quite often during the debates and during the run-up and say, what happened to this will be the last election? We're running for an election right now, and we're doing first past the post.
October 2019 when we go back to the polls.
Yeah. And when we did a study where we looked back at it was the first 2 years of Trudeau, and what were the accomplishments that people were really appreciating, and what were the low points or the broken promises that really hit home with them. And electoral reform was really high on that list, and a lot of people saw that as, a lot of people voted in that election simply because they wanted proportional representation. That's when you've got people who are, more inclined to support smaller parties, but one of the larger parties is saying that, we'll give you a piece of the pie. You just have to vote us in and then let us do our thing. And then next time, go back and vote for the Green Party, and it'll actually benefit you more. And that's simply not something that we see now. And I think this is going to be something that, alongside some of the big issues in terms of the deficit and immigration that the Conservatives are hitting, I think he's going to get quite a bit of an attack on this electoral reform, because that was such a strong, bold statement that really resonated with people. And when you look back on it, it's one of those ones that is just patently false.
Complete and utter failure.
Yeah, there's no fake news here. This is one of those things that is black and white. He said it, they didn't do it, so now they have to kind of run the next campaign with that black mark.
He's got a number of those things, I think, that have he'll try to tell you that campaign or promise made, campaign delivered. And I think the next one of those would have to be marijuana. He started his campaign on marijuana right here in Kelowna at Kerry Park. I was there that day. I saw him make the grandiose jump up onto the little mini stage at Kerry Park and saying, I'm announcing right now that if we become the government, we will legalize marijuana. And he stopped, and then he said, no, we will decriminalize marijuana. And there was a thunderous round of applause at that time. I think that a lot of Canadians looking at that promise, he's delivered, but then has he?
Yeah, it's a bit of a patchwork out there still right now. And we actually had the inclination that this is something that was brewing, and we asked twice this year Canadians in their province, did they think that their province was actually ready for legalization? And both times you had a majority saying no, they're not in BC, but in other provinces saying that, they needed more time, and they were concerned about various elements, whether that was the supply or how the criminal elements were going to be dealt with in terms of testing people on roadside tests. And, you saw that play out. We were originally supposed to have the deadline of July 1st, and then it was pushed back to October, which a lot of the provinces and some of the police community said, this is a good move. We need to push it back. And now you see that it's been legalized, but you can't find it in a lot of different places.
And the other side of this, since we're into a conversation about this, the reality is one of the things that they were holding out, that this was the big attempt. It was coast to coast to coast. And by doing so, we were going to remove the black market. We were going to remove the crime lords. We were going to remove the gangs from their marijuana industry, the pot industry. Well, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people that are reporting to me that they've had to return to the corner guy where they phone him ahead of time and he meets and he passes them their pot and they pass him the money, and it's going to be a while. If I hear everything, it's going to be a while before we remove the black market element.
And a lot of that is just simply a supply issue. There's so many places that are unable to really supply the market. And, when we kicked off in BC, we had one shop in Kamloops where if you wanted to go out on foot, that's the only place you could actually access this legal recreational marijuana. And you see now with the request to shut down all of the illegal shops in BC, which are being defied now, there's a lot of people still getting it through that. There's a lot of people still getting it through the black market because, A, there's not a lot of product available, and B, the prices have been really high. And you've seen those complaints across the country in terms of the restrictions.
And the other side of that is that I've seen a number of the store owners who are prepared to go to court if they have to, Vancouver being the prime example of that. They're saying we'll go to court because they're telling us that we have to shut our doors, go out of the business, apply to have a license, and then we can go back into business once granted the license. And I saw one owner of a chain of stores saying, how do you expect me to stop selling, to stop doing what I'm doing? Where's the money coming for to keep my staff? Where's the money coming from to keep my business, my location, while I wait and wait and wait in a process that looks exceedingly flawed?
Yeah, it's not like it's, if it was a very simple process to get it set up and the bureaucracy was all in line and the red tape was able to be cut quickly, then you might see people saying, I'll be up and running within the month. We just got to file some papers and make sure that we're getting our suppliers all in a line and getting it from a place that's recognized by the federal government and the provinces. But that's not what you're hearing. You're seeing a lot of people, just in conversations that I've had out and about, and just saying, they're looking into the market and saying, wow, this is really prohibitive and this is a very difficult thing for us to try to get in line with and get all of our ducks in the row and try to keep, they got to keep money coming in.
Okay. A conversation with Dave Korzinski. He is a research associate with Angus Reid. I want to ask you, though, I need to take a break. When we come back, I want to open the conversation by saying, what is the bigger issue relative to the voters? Is it the promise of electoral reform, which he's failed on, or was it the promise of legalized marijuana, recreational pot being readily available, which might be the biggest thing when it comes to a black mark against the government, the administration of Justin Trudeau? Back in a minute.